Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining in for another audio production techniques lecture. So far we have covered sort of the signal flow from the source of a sound up to a mixer. And today and in the upcoming lectures, we are going to look at what we can do with the sound signals that we get into our digital audio workstation. It could be mixers or software. So wherever we get the sound signals, we can do certain level of manipulation, certain level of changes to those sound signals. That is what we are going to be focusing in the upcoming lectures, including today's one. So when we say audio signal processing, it is essentially that we are having audio signals coming into our workstations, and we are going to use some form of processing functionalities. So these are going to be signal processing functionalities to effect some changes in the sound that is there. So this could be this could come under a variety of categories, and we'll be looking at some of them this week, and we'll be focusing on a few of those in the next week. So when we say audio signal processing, it's basically we are taking an audio signal. So audio signal is going to be produced from a sound source. Could be a voice, could be an instrument, whatever the sound source that may be. So then that audio signal is going to transfer through a number of places. It could go through from a microphone to a mixer to whatever. But at some point, we can bring in signal processing to that mix. So what we would do is we would take that input signal, make some changes to that input signal, and then we are going to put that to the output, or that is going to continue in that signal path. In doing those functions, in doing those signal processing functions, we can categorize them based on, we can change some key properties of sound. So when we do processing, what we are going to do is we are going to change some of the key properties of the sound. So one is dynamics. So the dynamics is what we mean by the level of the sound. So how loud, how low, so that level of the sound, the dynamic range of the sound, that is what we identify as dynamics. So then we can change that amplitude, how much intensity and so on. We can change that. There will be certain processing functions on about that. Then we can have certain functions working in terms of frequency. So that is when we say sound, we already identified sound can fall under a range of frequencies. So then we can manipulate that frequency. So we can increase the sound in a certain frequency range, or we can cut sound in a certain frequency range. So that is frequency related sound processing. Then we can also do time related sound processing. So these are certain sound processing where we are manipulating the time of the sound. So we can slow down the sound signal, we can speed up the sound signal, or we can have certain repetitions of the sound signal, like echoes and reverbs. So these are three main properties of sound signals that we will manipulate to get some signal processing functions for our audio signals. So with dynamic functions, we change the amplitude of the sound. So that is, we can have a very softer sound to a louder sound, and we can change that. Whether if it is a louder sound, we can make it softer. If it is a softer sound, we can make it louder. So some of the signal processors that we may use under this category are what we call as compressors, limiters, expanders, and gates. And this is what we will be focusing on in today's lecture. But then other than that, we can also have functions that modify the frequency. So they can change the various frequencies of the sound signal, and as a result, they can change the pitch and harmonics of the sound. So again, if you remember from our earlier lectures where we discussed about pitch and how it is a perceived notion of frequencies. So by changing frequencies, we can change the pitch of a sound signal. So these can be equalizers, high pass, low pass filters, or a variety of other advanced filters or signal processors as well. Then time-based signal processing are going to be somehow they are going to manipulate the time signal or the relevant to the time frame. So delaying by certain milliseconds or stretching by certain milliseconds and so on. So these are reverbs, delays, echoes and so on. So in today's lecture, we'll be focusing on dynamic signal processing, and in the upcoming lectures, we'll focus on frequency based signal processing and time based signal processing. So when we think about signal processing, when we think about audio being manipulated in a signal path, one of the main things that needs to happen is about controlling the gain, controlling the amplitude of the signal, how much amplification is added to that signal. So a key property that we would use here is what we call as the dynamic range. So a dynamic range is similar to, say, you would have covered some of these in other subjects like images and so on, where dynamic range is the difference between the lighter part of the signal to the louder part of the signal. So if the lightest of the sound is say minus 30 dB and the loudest of the sound is minus 3 dB, here the dynamic range is 27 dBs. So that is the dynamic range, the distance between the loudest of the sound and to the lowest of the sound. So what we would have is that our sound signal can fall under that range of from the highest to the lowest. So when it goes beyond a highest point, we would call as the distortion point. So what we would have is we would have a higher point above which, if the signal goes above that, it will be not clear. It would get distorted, and it could be the signal is not going to be preserved as it is. And on the other hand, we would have a noise flow, which is like if we go below that point, noise of that signal is going to get significantly more powerful than the actual sound signal itself. So again, that is something that we would want to avoid. So we would want to bring this up so that the signal to noise ratio is much more there, and but still not have it hitting the distortion point. So that is the main thing to understand about dynamic range. So sound can range in a significant variation. So that can depend on the microphones that we are using, the various tools that we are using can dictate what is the dynamic range that we are getting, and also depends on the sound source itself. Not every sound source is going to produce a highly dynamic sound. Some may produce in a very limited range of amplitudes in terms of the sound signal that they are producing. Whereas a human voice, for example, will be able to talk very softly and talk very loudly, and hence creating a significantly higher dynamic range. So one of the things that we will be utilizing in terms of identifying the uh, gain or the amplitude of the signal is various amplitude meters. So they are basically going to show what is the level of amplitude or what is the highest level of amplitude that is there in the sound signal at a particular point in time. So these could be uh, ppm meters or VU meters or any variety of meters. But the thing to remember here is the amplitude, the output that you see in the amplitude meters is not a good measure to give you an impression of what you could hear. So what I mean is, just by looking at one of these amplitude meters, you should not be mixing or you should not be deciding what is the level of sound should be. The reason is the way that we perceive the level of sound, we perceive the loudness of sound, does not depend on a point of amplitude, it depends on the period of amplitude. Say, for example, if we just hear a pulse of very high amplitude sound, that may not be perceived as a very high sound compared to sustained level of somewhat lesser amplitude sound but still higher. Say, for example, if we hear a minus 2 dB sound for say 1 second and a minus 3 dB sound for say 10 seconds, our ears may learn the latter one as the more louder one because it is applied for a prolonged period of time. So that's the thing to remember when we are comparing. It's not just the point of amplitude. Say if we have a signal that is just going for a high amplitude and then after that it is very low, that may not be perceived as loud as another signal that is constantly at a sort of medium level. This one may be perceived as a more higher sound compared to the other one. So one of the more accurate measures or one of the more suitable measures for using or getting an understanding about amplitudes is using RMS meters, or what we call as root mean square meters. So what these ones are, they are going to get an average of the sound over a period of time. So they are going to calculate an average of the sound over a period of time. So that would be much more closer to what we can get from a loudness perception of our ears. So that would be much more closer to how human ears could be perceiving the loudness of the sound. So this should also be used to get a better understanding of the sound signal that we are processing. So what we would have is we would say take the samples of the sound at a particular intervals and say we will go and take a number of samples of the sound signals and we will take every point amplitudes there. We will take the square root of the point amplitude. Say for example, if this is 3 and 4 and 5, we would take 3 squared plus 4 squared plus 5 squared and then take a square root of that. So that is root mean squared. We should take the average of that as well. So so that is one of the measures that we would use when we are considering a suitable measure for amplitudes. So then there's another thing that we need to remember is not every sound signal or every measure is going to be same across different ways of measuring them. So we will have different meters measuring sound using different scales. So we can have different scales, meaning, so when we say a particular sound or particular level of sound may be measured differently or as different numerical values in different meters. So a sample that we can see here is, say, on a dBFS scale and dBVU scale and dBU scale, we may have the same level. Say a -6 could be 0 in another scale and 4 in another scale. So we also need to understand which meter that we are using and what is the scale that particular meter is using. So in dBFS meters, for example, what we have is they would measure up to 0. So 0 is the distortion point in dBFS meters, whereas dBU meters may have +24 as the distortion point, and so on. So different meters will have different ranges to say what is the distortion point and what is the negative point. So we may have to identify that, and sometimes we may have to say, depending on what is the type of meter that is being used in a particular tool, we may have to choose between these different scales. Now let's look at what we do when we are changing the amplitude or some of the different ways that we can change the amplitude in a sound signal. So the first place that we would change is, so basically when we say changing the amplitude, it is basically we are either bringing it up, or sometimes we can also bringing it down, so increasing or decreasing the amplitude of the signal. So the first point where we would normally change that is what we call as the pre-amplification. So in mixer terminology, we may call it as trimming. So this is where we would initially introduce some level of amplitude to bring the signal level up to a particular expected level that we would want. So if the signal that is being produced by the sound source, for example a microphone, if the signal that is being produced is too low, we would increase that by a pre-amplification so that it can be used in any further signal processing. Because for most signal processing, we would expect a certain level of sound signal as input. So we would use the pre-amplification to introduce a certain level of amplification there. Then another type of amplification we can have is what is called the power amplification. This is what we would have at the end of a mixing cycle, where the sound goes out to powered speakers or drive high powered speakers. They would need a much higher voltage of signal to drive those speakers. So we would amplify the signal, output signal, even further to a higher level so that they can drive these powerful speakers. So at that point, again, we would have some level of amplification we would call as power amplification. Then we would also have in certain mixers, we sort of briefly touched upon this in the previous week, things like options to pad or attenuate the signal. So that is, say, if we are having line level signals and microphone level signals, we know that they come in different levels. So to have them introduced into the same chain of mixers, we may have to increase or decrease. So we may use a amplifier to increase the gain. We may use a pad or an attenuator to decrease the sound level. So normally this could be a switch that is adding certain level of fixed level of reduction to the amplification of the sound. Then we can also use the faders that are available in the mixers to gradually change the amplification of the sound. So we can say normally in a mixer, if we leave the fader at 0, then it is not adding any amplification or taking away any amplification. But if we move above 0, it is going to add amplification, and if you bring it below 0, we would negatively add an amplification. So we would add a reduction to the amplitude of the signal. And in certain other places where we may have amplification is when we connect things through direct boxes. So this is again something that we discussed previously, where we may use direct boxes to connect over long distances across using balanced cables. So, and most direct boxes expect the signal level to be much higher than what could be the input signal. So again, their direct boxes may add some level of amplification, and possibly at the other end we may add a pad or an attenuator to bring that level down. So those are some of the common places where we may introduce amplification into our sound signal. So starting from the microphone, we may add some preamplification, or depending on the sound source. We may connect it through a direct box that may introduce some amplification. Then when it comes to the mixer, we may use some padding or attenuator to maybe reduce some amplification. We may use the fader of the mixer to again add or reduce amplification. Then when the output signal gets out, there again we may use some additional amplification to bring it to the level to drive more powerful speakers. So when we think about these various amplifications that we can have through the various stages of signal or sort of audio signals paths, what we have is a concept of gain staging. So what we have here is, because we have different stages where we can add gain. So we can add some gain at the initial stage at the preamplifier. We can add some gain later on, maybe inside the mixer using the fader. So there are number of places where we can add some gain or the amplification to the sound signal. So each of the places where we are adding these amplifications is a gain stage. So the preamplifier is a gain stage, the fader is a gain stage, the power amplifier is a gain stage. So all of these places are different gain stages. So what we would want to have is to reduce the number of places where we are adding gain stages. The reason being, every time we add some amplification, or we add some amplification at onto a signal at a particular point, what also happens is the noise that is going to be there also gets amplified. So what we may have is, say we have a signal level here, noise level here. So this is the signal to noise ratio of the original signal. But then after a while we add a reduction to the signal. So now the amplitude is reduced, but what happens is the noise still remains, because the noise doesn't go away. Noise will always be there, whatever the carrier signal noise and so on. But then if we amplify that signal again, what we may end up with is a signal now that has a reduced signal to noise ratio compared to the original signal. So for that reason, we would want to avoid multiple stages of adding gain. So uh, we would try to minimize the number of places where we are adding gains. So reduction is one thing. If we reduce and then increase again, we are going to increase the noise as well. So we want, what we want to do is we want to set the gain initially at a particular point, but then after that you try to cut back, never to add again. So an example here, what we can see is, say if we think about the overall sound signal flow, we may start with a sound source, say a vocal sound source for example. It goes to a mic, then goes through a mic preamplifier, then may go to a audio interface or a mixer, then may go to a computer, then it may go to a DAW to be recorded. Then it can go back into the DAW, and inside the DAW or inside the mixer, it again gets processed. Variety of, we can again add DAW, reduce multiplications and so on. Then it can come back. Then again it comes out to a digital to analog converter, then back to an amplifier that is going to play out the signal. Then it comes to again listening back. So in this place, there are a number of places where we may add amplification. So from the beginning in a preamplification all the way to the end, where we have some amplification in the device that we are listening the sound back in. So all these places can potentially increase the presence of noise in the signal. So what we would do is, if you want to add gain, so if you want to add amplification, the first thing we need to do is we do the most of the amplification at the first part of the signal as early as possible. Then after that, we only do either leave it at unity, so leave it at 0, or maybe we do reductions. So we increase the sound signal to the highest possible signal, beyond which it doesn't clip, so it doesn't go to distortion, but we will leave it below distortion, but as high as possible. But then after that, we don't try to increase that again. So that is the earliest part of the signal. So for example, at the pre-amplification stage, for example, we will add all the amplification we want. After that, we either leave it at unity at 0, or we do reductions. By doing this type of ideal gain staging, what we would gain is, we would get much better signal to noise ratio, because we are not amplifying the noise multiple times, because noise gets amplified at the first stage, but then after that the noise stays the same, because we are not adding any amplification after that. So that is again something to focus on when we are trying to set the gain or the amplification in a sound signal. So now let's briefly touch upon what is sort of a good practice procedure to set the levels of a signal, to set a good gain staging in our mix, or for the purpose of recording or whatever, we may follow this practice. So first is to start with a clean slate. So in our mixer, set everything to a 0 or a unity level. So bring the preamplification down back to 0, set the faders to 0. So everything we will set to 0 and reset everything, and we'll start from that. Then from there we can go to a particular input. We select the particular input, and then ideally we would want to set the level per channel individually. So if we have a number of microphones and musical instruments and so on, the initial gain staging ideally we would want to do to individual channels separately if that is possible. So we can solo each in most mixers that may be possible to solo individual channels and listen to those channels separately and set their levels. So what we would do is, say for example, if it is a singer, we would ask them to sing at the range that they may sing. So ask them to sing at the loudest that they may sing, and also ask them to sing at the lightest or the softest that they may sing. So then once the sound, the typical sound that we expect from the sound source is coming into the mixer, you would set the trim level or the preamplification level. You will increase it slowly until the point where it reaches the peak. So until it starts to hit the peak, we will sort of go up to that point and maybe sometimes slightly bring it down a notch and leave it at that. So now the loudest part of that incoming signal, loudest possible part of that incoming signal will not hit the peak, but it will almost go up to the peak point or the distortion point of that channel. So then that is what that is where we would set the maximum, the first gain. So we have set the gain as much as possible. So because beyond that it is going to hit distortion, so we have set it as much as possible. And because we have done it at the trim stage, at the preamplification stage, we have introduced it as early as possible as well. So by doing this, after this point, what we would always do is we would just add reductions after this, because we don't have to do any more additions after this point. So that is a basic way of setting the level or the amplitude of an incoming signal into a particular channel of a mixer or a DAW. So then another type of amplification that we may find is not every amplification is going to be seen as an amplification. For example, by increasing the preamplifier, you know that is an amplification. By changing the fader, you know that an amplification. But when you do panning, so panning is changing the signal across the stereo channels. For example, if we have 2-channel audio, we can pan it across the 2 channels. So in that case, panning is also technically some form of amplification. So what happens is, in panning, it either increases, so it takes 2 channels of audio and it adds amplification to one channel and reduction to another channel. So that is one thing that it can do. That is, it is still changing the amplification of the signal. So say if we have a stereo signal, normally it is going to be say balanced across right and left channels. But if we want to increase the left and decrease the right, so it is now more towards the left channel, we would either add some amplification to the left or add some reduction to the right. So now left is more prominent. So then again, here we can have 2 approaches. One is called the linear approach, which is basically when we increase it to one side, it just increases one side and decreases the other one. The problem is it is not very natural, it is not ideal, so we will not use these type of panning amplifiers, and most suitable panning amplifiers would be non-linear panning amplifiers. So they would have a sort of a non-linear pattern in terms of how they do the panning across the both channels. So when at the sort of the midpoint, there would be a reduction of say the midpoint reduction would be about say minus or 3 to 4.5 dBs compared to both ends of the spectrum or both ends of the channel, left and right. Okay, so once we are able to set our initial amplification, initial gain of our signal, now we can think about some signal processes that are going to do dynamic signal processing. So, these are the signal processes that are going to manipulate the amplitude of the signal. So, to come to this point, we have to set our initial gains properly. So, initial level setting should be done properly. Then only we can come to the stage of doing dynamic signal processing. Without doing the initial gain staging properly, if we just try to do dynamic signal processing or try to fix the amplification of the audio just by using dynamic signal processors, that may not be a correct approach. So, even though when we say dynamics of the audio, that is the amplitude variation of the audio, so technically when we have these dynamic signal processes, we can set the signal amplitude or manipulate the signal amplitude using only these. But ideally we would not do that. We would prefer to do using various gain staging options, various initial gain setting options to get the signal up to the optimum level. Then we may use dynamic signal processing to make some changes into the signal. So when we say amplitude of the signal, what we have is the dynamic range starting from the highest amplitude and the lowest amplitude. But say for example, when we take a typical sound signal, what we may have is we may have a certain average level where the sound signal is going to go. So that is going to be the average level of the sound. But then in addition to that, we may find some places where it is going transiently peaking. So time to time it may go to a much higher level, but it will come down again. So it is going to peak and it will going to come down again. Similarly, you may also find in certain places it may go down below the sort of the average level, and then it may again come back to the average level. So as we said, our perceived loudness that we get, we can understand through our ears or through our listening is something comparable to the RMS levels of the sound. So the perceived loudness is similar to or equal to the RMS levels of the sound. So, and one of the other main reasons for that is our ears are going to be responsive to certain spectrum of the sound comparatively other spectrums of the sound. So, and there's this thing about different age people can hear different sounds or can perceive different sounds and so on. So at the end of the day, we are going to have different levels of perception of sound. So what we would want to have is, we would want to have some level of dynamics in our signal. To it should be able to represent the highest parts and the lowest parts. But we would also want to sometimes reduce the dynamics, or we may want to not have so many transient peaks, because those transient peaks are going to suddenly go up and down. So we may want to reduce that a little bit. The reason is, say for example, if our average sound signal is say -6, it is staying at -6, and our transient peak is now almost hitting 0. So we can't increase the sound signal beyond that. But the problem is, now the average is still 6, and the perceived loudness is going to depend on the average, because it is going to be the root mean squared, which is an average calculation. So even though we are at time to time peaking at 0, our whole signal is almost at the -6 level. So the loudness is much less than the 0 level. So if that is not something we want, we may have to bring the dynamic range lesser. So that is the distance between the lightest part of the sound, softest part of the sound, and the loudest part of the sound. So that is what we may do with these dynamic effects. So there are two main terminologies that we would use when we talk about dynamic processes. So one is threshold and the other one is ratio. So what happens in dynamic processes is basically they are going to change the dynamic range of the sound signal. They are going to increase or decrease the dynamic range. Say for example, if we had a sound signal that had the highest peak at 0 and the lowest point at minus 30, so that has a dynamic range of 30. So now if we can bring that signal, say if its highest peaks to minus 6, and if we can bring the lowest signals to say minus 24, now our dynamic range is 18. So here 30, here 18. So this is what we would do in dynamic processes, changing the dynamic range, either bringing the louder sound lower or bringing the lighter sounds higher. So to do this, we would use mainly two parameters. One is called the threshold, the other one is the ratio. So threshold is basically a reference point of amplitude where we are going to do the checking. Say for example, we can say we can bring any amplitude above minus 6, we can reduce that, or we can increase any signal that is below minus 30. So say we would set a point in our amplification, so it could be minus 6. We could say any signal above minus 6, we would either reduce its amplification or increase its amplification. So that is the threshold. Then ratio is the value that we would say how much amplification that we are adding. So how much how much reduction of amplification in most cases. So say if it is 1:1, that means we are not changing. So the input signal is at say minus 6, output signal is also going to be minus 6. If we do say 2:1, what we would do is, say if our threshold was set to minus 6, so we said the threshold was set to minus 6, our incoming signal was at minus 2. So we have a 2:1 ratio. Our threshold is set to minus 6. Now we have an incoming signal, signal input level is at minus 2. So when we have minus 2, the input level, the dynamic range or the range difference between the threshold and the input is now 4. So if it is 4, the difference is 4, we would bring that to 2. So 2:1, we would do a every 2 dB, we will bring it by half. Or every 2 dB that is goes in, 1 dB comes out. So this becomes 2. So whatever the signal that was at minus 2 now becomes minus 4. Say for example, if we had a signal at 0, the input level was 0. So now the range was 6. So the reduction that would be added is 3. So the output would be minus 3. So that is what we would do in terms of ratio. So we can have variety of ratios. It doesn't have to be 2:1. Say for example, if we do 4:1, in this case, the 4 would have become 1. So minus 2 would have become minus 5. So a reduction of 4. So that is basically ratio. So these two properties, threshold and ratio, are something we are going to be using in all the dynamic processes. So we would identify a number of different dynamic processes, and in all of these we will be using these two parameters. And in addition to those two, we may also use two other parameters, what is called an attack and a release time. So an attack time is basically, say when a signal is going through, signal is going to change over time. So when the signal is detected to go to it is detected at the threshold level, at what point in time, after which point it should start the processing. So say if the amplitude goes like this and it is detected at this point, so that is where it passes the threshold point, so that is the detection point. So there, from that point to which point the effect starts to apply, so the processing starts to apply, so the attack time. So how quickly the processor is going to react. Then the release time is how quickly the processor will stop applying when the signal level comes below the threshold. Say for example, say if we have a signal and we say the signal should not pass, the threshold is -6. So now the signal is going like this. So at this point it has passed -6. So then from there we decide after what time we start to apply the dynamic processor. So we say in 2 milliseconds we can start applying the dynamic process, or 20 milliseconds or whatever. Then after some point the signal is going to go below the threshold again. So when the signal goes below the threshold again, then what do we do? At what point because we can't keep on adding reductions when it's below the threshold, so we would stop applying the processor. So then that is the time we would have as release time. So these two things we would use to get different type of outcomes in our signal. Say if our signal changes very quickly, say if it is a very quickly changing type of signal, we may have to have much quicker attack times. But having much quicker attack times may create a more artificial type of sound output in certain situations. So we have to decide what is the suitable attack and release time depending on the type of the sound signal that we are manipulating. So with these dynamic processors, we would categorize them into two main categories. So what we would do is we would take either sound signals above a threshold. So we would take any sound signal above a threshold and we would bring it down. We would do a reduction to that. So that is either downward compressors or limiters would bring the sound level down. Then we could also have certain things that are going to reduce the amplitudes when the sound signal is below a threshold, and these are what we call as downward expanders or gating. We will look at each of these in a bit more detail. But one of the main things to remember is even though most dynamic processors are going to do reductions as part of the way that they internally work, we would also, that doesn't mean they are always going to make the sound more quieter, because what we may do is we are just bringing the dynamic range lower, but still the average sound level still may remain the same, because it is not going to change the average sound so much, because what we are doing is we are just cutting off these higher parts of the signal and making it much more compressed, much more in a smaller range of the sound, but the average sound still may remain same. So that doesn't mean it is always going to make the sound more quieter. So one of the most common dynamic signal processing that you may use is what is called a compressor or a downward compressor. So that is the basic one that we previously looked at. What it does is it identifies a threshold point, and any signal that is much more higher than the threshold point, it adds a reduction based on the ratio and brings the sound signal level down. So this is normally used to bring these transient peaks of the sounds lower, closer to the average. Say for example, if we have a much more transient sound signal, like that is ranging from a significantly higher dynamic range, by compressing the signal, we can bring the higher parts of the signal down and down, so it is much close, everything stays much closer to the average level. So say if our average level was -9 and our peak was at -3, if we do some reduction and if we bring the peak to say -7 and the average is 9, so now the dynamic range is much lesser. So we may want to use these to do such a thing. One of the other things that we can do is by bringing the higher peaks lower, then it may give us the room to add more amplification. Say for example, if our signal has some transient peaks that are hitting 0 all the time, so now it is hitting 0, so we cannot add any more amplification to the signal, but our average remains at -9. So now if we bring the transient peaks using some compression, bring it down, so we add some gain reduction to any signal that is above -9. Say we add a 3:1 gain reduction, so anything at 0 anything at 0 is going to be reduced by a 3:1 ratio, so it will come down significantly. So now we can add more amplification to bring the whole average sound up. So if we just go through that example again, what we would have is, say our problem is our sound signal has a significantly higher dynamic range. So that is, we have a sound signal that is the average is at -9, but it has some transient peaks at 0, so there's a dynamic range of 9 here. So then that means even though average sound signal is here, we cannot amplify it anymore as long as there are some transient peaks here, because it will hit distortion. So what we want to do is we want to bring this transient peaks below, significantly below, so we can add some amplification now here. So what we can do is, say if we do a 3:1 compression, so we do a 3:1 gain reduction, so anything at 0 is 9, the range is 9, so it becomes every 3 dB that goes in, 1 dB comes out, so that becomes 3. So anything at 0 would have now come to -6. So now the sound signal is between -6 and -9. So the average and the peak point is -6 and -9. So to this we can add a gain of up to 6. We can add a gain of up to 6 to bring this whole thing up to the higher point to 0. So now we can add a amplification of 0. So the average at -9 would now come to -3. So now we have introduced a significant amplification here. So this is one of the reasons why we may do compressors, but we need to remember that by compressing and then possibly adding some gain after that, overall gain after that, we may also increase the noise flow. That is also possible. So that is something to keep in mind. But this is one way to add gain when we cannot add to the already existing signal. So we basically reduce the dynamic range and then we can add some gain. So what happens is any signal that is below the threshold level, nothing happens. So only when the signal passes this threshold level, anything above that will be compressed. Their levels will be reduced. So these signals, their levels will be reduced lower, and anything below the threshold level, nothing happens, no changes to those signals. So those will remain the same. So what we would do is, as I said, we would add a compressor to bring that range down. Then whatever the reduction that we gained by adding the compressor, because compressor is going to add some reduction to the peaks. So if the compressor is reducing by, say, it has reduced by 3 dBs, and then we can add a 3 dB gain to the output signal, or anything that is coming out of the compressor can now have a 3 dB gain, still not peaking. So that is what we would want to have. And in terms of the other properties of the compressor regarding setting attack and release times, again, as I said, this would largely depend on the type of audio signal that we are dealing with. Say, if we are concerned about the vocal signal compared to a drum, for example, both of these sound sources may produce sound significantly differently. For example, a vocal, the change of the loudness in a vocal cannot be that abrupt because it has to come at a certain speed. Or compared to a string instrument, there again the amplification and also depends on the way that it is being used. The way that you may be singing, speaking, all these things will decide what is the suitable attack time, how quickly you should react to something. And release time is also similarly has to be thought out depending on the type of the sound, at what point you should drop off the effect, or should be suddenly drop off, or should be slowly drop it off. So we have to think about these two parts as well. Having slow attack times will help sort of slowly so without having these sudden changes, we can have slow attack times to react much more in certain type of sounds. It will help us react in a certain manner, but in sort of fast percussive sounds, so like a drum or a certain way of speaking, for example, having a fast transient time, a fast attack time is important, because unless you attack fast, as soon as the sound signal comes in, you may miss the sound that you need to process. Say, for example, if you are hitting a drum, you may go to these peaks at time to time. So unless you quickly react to that peak and reduce that drum signal, then you may not ideally control that. You may miss processing those signals. So you have to have the attack time suitable based on the type of sound. Then also having release time, again we can think about certain type of instruments. A certain type of instruments may want to have these sustained type of sound outcomes. Say a violin or something, or certain instruments can have a long sustained sort of type of amplification amplitude coming out of the signal. So again we may have to think about suitable release time or slower release time in those situations. Two of the problems that we may have with setting these times is what is called pumping. So that is, if we have too fast attack and release times, then we may see the compression or the activity of compression happening may be audibly listenable. So if when you're listening to a signal, you can say, okay, that seems very highly compressed. So that is a thing to avoid as well. And the other problem is when we have a problem with the noise flow, or the noise flow of the signal is can be heard through the outcome. Again, a problem could be we are having a very slow release time, so we may have to reduce the release time to control that problem. Again, these things would largely depend on the type of signals that you may be processing, and again, you have to go through and practice these things to get a better understanding of how these things work. So the next type of dynamic processor is what we called as a limiter. So basically, limiter is a way to, it is again a compressor. The way that it is going to do work is compressor, but what it is going to do is it is going to add a very extreme compression. So previously our compressors were say 2:1 or 3:1. They were adding some reductions, whereas here we may go beyond ranges of say 10:1, where we are almost not letting any sound pass. Say if the only for 10 dBs above the scale, we will let 1 dB go past. So we'll only let a very small amount of sound go past, or it could, we may even not get any sound amplification beyond that one. We'll add a total reduction there. So what we would have is, we can use these limiters to make sure the sound doesn't go beyond a particular set point. Say if we set a limiter at -6 dB, we can ensure that the sound doesn't go beyond 6 dB at all. So we may use this if certain instruments don't like certain level of sounds coming into them and so on. We may use this to limit the higher level or the peak level at a particular point in time. So again, one of the things that we may have to do with limiters is, one of the challenges would be we may not be able to always react to the sound at the 0 point in time. So when the signal is coming to the signal processor, we may not be able to identify that it is going to hit or go beyond the threshold to add the reduction immediately. But if you want to ensure that it is always limited at that level, we may use what is called an approach called look ahead. So that is, we would have the level of the sound identified previously, so that it can be at the point of compressing or at the point of limiting, it can add the appropriate level of reduction based on the peak level it had identified. So basically, limiters are also compressors with much higher ratios. So that's the thing to remember. These are not significantly different from compressors except to the level of the ratio that is applied there. So then another type of dynamic effect that we may, dynamic processor that we may use is called an expander or a downward expander. And with these, what we do is we take any signal below this threshold point and we apply the processing there. In compressors, we apply it at above the threshold level. Here we apply below the threshold level. And here what we do is we add reduction below the threshold level. Say for example, if we say anything that's below 24 dB, we are going to reduce that by another 10 dB. So if we do another 10 dB there, what we may end up with is, so anything that is below 24, so these are the softest or the most, not the significant parts of the sound. We will reduce the sound so that it is not interfering with the signal. So this is to reduce reverbs, reduce noise and so on. We would bring the sound below a certain level. So if we can make sure our main sound is normally, so if I am speaking and my main sound is normally at say the range could be I am normally speaking between say now, actually when I am speaking now my range is between minus 25 or so, above minus 25. So I can add a limiter, an downward expander here. I have actually added a downward expander here at minus 30 dB. So any sounds that's below minus 30 dB, it's considered as a noise, because every time I am speaking above minus 30. So anything below that will be reduced as noise or any other unwanted sound. We would add reduction to that signal. So what we would end up having is we would have a much more, in a way the dynamic range of the signal now increases. We are not increasing at the higher part of the signal, we are bringing it down, so the dynamic range still increases. So say for example, initially the sound was between 0 and minus 24. Now we have added a 10 dB reduction, now it has become minus 34. So now the dynamic range is much higher than without using an expander. Basically we would normally use expanders as a tool to eliminate noise, reverbs or additional unwanted sounds in our signal. Then gates are again a variation of downward expanders, similar to how limiters and compressors, expanders and gates are again similar. Here we would have a much higher ratio of expander. What it would do is it would have a limit beyond which any sound below that point would infinitely reduced or significantly reduced, so you are not going to hear. So you can add a noise gate, for example, to say this microphone is not going to pick up any sound below once the signal goes below a particular level. So in my sound chain, for example, for this particular microphone, I have a noise gate that is set at minus 40 dB. So when I am not speaking and it is only the external noise that is coming, all the environment noise, it will normally go below minus 40, so it will totally cut off that sound. So again, this can be used as a way of noise reduction technique. So another thing that we may use along with these dynamic signal processors is what is called side chaining. So this is here what we do is, say, so whatever the gain reduction device, it could be a compressor or whatever, the control signal of how much we are going to compress, that is going to come from what is called a side chain. So we may have an external input that may dictate how much compression that we are adding uh, to a particular different signal. So we may have, say, either a different a parallel signal that is influencing, or different instrument. So the application can vary. So it can depend on different applications, but the basic technique is the amount of gain reduction that we add to a particular audio source can depend on an external input, or either a predetermined level reduction. So either as a look ahead type of a technique, or from an external input. But what we do is we do the level control through an external input. So that is what we call as side chaining. We may use this type of side chaining not only for dynamic effects, but we may use this quite often here. Say, for example, we may have we may be mixing or music. For example, we may have a bass guitar and a kick drum mic separately, but we may use one input from one of these signals to do the compression on the other signal. So this is how we may use. So we may take one signal as an input to decide what is the level of compression that should be added to the other signal. So that is what we call as side chaining. So with side chaining, we can have a number of approaches. So for example, what we can do is one of the thing is called ducking. So ducking is say we have two sound sources going. So I am speaking and I am also playing a background music. So when I am not speaking, the level of my background music can be at a higher level. But when I start speaking, the level of my background music should be reduced. So we can have a side chained input taking the, say, mic and the music. So whatever the input from the mic can come and influence the level of amplification on the music. So when we have more signal of the voice, we will reduce the music. When the signal of voice is no longer there, when I stop speaking, we can bring the music back again. So that is what we call as ducking. Then we can also do what is called de-essing. So this is combining certain frequency filtering properties and amplification. So one of the problems that we may have in certain type of sounds is we have these S sounds and per sounds, which are something that we may want to avoid in sounds because they are not pleasant in certain situations. So because they can lead to sort of unnecessary peaks and so on. So what we can do is we can isolate those frequencies and have those frequencies at a separate signal path, and whenever those signals are coming in, we can add more reduction through a compressor. So we can do certain isolated frequency level isolation and use that as an input signal through a side chain. We call that de-essing. And the other option is what we call as gating. So gating is basically again having the input level decide when to open or close a particular track. So we could use the input of one track to dictate whether the other track is opened or not, whether the other track is also active or not. So these are some additional techniques that we may use when we are using these dynamic processes. So as I said, in this lesson we covered dynamic processing effects. But the main thing to remember is I have only covered the basics here. You may have to do some practice on your own to better understand how these effects are applied. So one good place to do that is you have this coursework that you need to do. You have this homework that you need to do, assignment submission coming up. We have to do recordings with your microphone and so on. So in that coursework, try to apply some of these dynamic effects, compressions and so on, to see how those can be effectively used to get a better sound. So I have also included some links to certain tutorials and so on, so you may refer to those and get a better understanding as well. That's what I suggest. So I have covered some basics. I have covered how ratios and threshold work. So you should have an understanding when you're using these effects in your workstations, in your digital audio workstations. But unless you practice them in those, you will not be able to get a better understanding of how these things are working. So I would suggest that you go and practice these effects in your tools that you are using. So that's what you need to do. You need to go and practice as much as possible, and that's the way you can get better at this subject. So other than that, that's all we need to cover for the day. We will look at other types of effects, frequency-based and time-based effects in the next lecture. Are there any questions from today's lecture? So we may conclude the lesson today with this, as there are no other questions. We will meet next week around same time, and in the meantime, if you have any questions about the things we have covered, if you want to do some practicals, or if you have any problems doing those practicals, please let me know. So until next time, thanks for joining in this lesson. See you. Bye.